June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea, Western Pacific. The dawn light bled slowly over the horizon, streaks of gold cutting through a vast ocean that seemed to stretch forever. On the bridge of the USS Lexington, CV-16, Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher stood with his binoculars raised, eyes narrowing at the rising sun. The sea was calm, but the air was heavy with expectation, the kind that settles before an earthquake. Below decks, the corridors thrummed with energy. Men checked their flight gear, engines roared to life, and the scent of oil, sweat, and salt water mixed into one restless perfume. On the flight deck, ranks of Grumman F-6F Hellcats shimmered under the sun, their wings folded like sleeping beasts, waiting for the order to strike. "Launch positions!" the deck officer yelled through the roar of propellers. It was the morning the Japanese Imperial Navy had hoped would never come. The day America's 15 Essex-class carriers, flanked by fast battleships and light carriers, turned the Philippine Sea into an aircraft crucible. From 20,000 feet above the fleet, the view was astonishing. A vast armada cutting across the blue expanse, nearly 900 aircraft poised to rise into the sky. The task force, commanded by Admiral Raymond Spruance and his fast carrier group under Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, was about to meet Japan's remaining carrier strength head-on. On the Japanese side, far to the west near the island of Guam, Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet pushed forward, 9 carriers, hundreds of Zero fighters, and a desperate belief that their pilots could still turn the tide of war. But Tokyo's planners had gravely misjudged what America could build and how fast. Just 2 years earlier, the Imperial Navy's admirals had laughed at reports of a new American supercarrier class. "Impossible," they had said. "The Americans cannot produce ships of that scale in such numbers." They were wrong, terribly wrong. The Essex-class carriers were not just bigger, they were faster, more efficient, and virtually unstoppable. They could launch, recover, refuel, and rearm squadrons in continuous waves. By June 1944, 15 of them were operational, a floating city of air power that dwarfed anything that the world had seen before. As the morning sun climbed higher, radar screens aboard USS Iowa and USS Enterprise began to flicker. The blips appeared, small clusters at first, then larger groups. The Japanese were coming. At 10 a.m., Task Force 58's radar operators confirmed over 300 incoming bogies, 4 attack waves launched from Ozawa's fleet heading straight for the American Armada. Mitcher's order was calm, almost clinical. "Get the Hellcats up, all of them." Engines screamed to life. Deck crews sprinted across the carrier decks, waving flags, signaling pilots. The first F-6F Hellcats catapulted into the sky, climbing into formation, sunlight glinting off their dark blue wings. Behind them followed Avengers, Dauntlesses, and Helldivers, the steel birds that would define the day. For the Japanese, the attack had begun with confidence. Their Zeros and Judy dive bombers swept low across the water, expecting scattered American resistance. Instead, they flew into a sky already filled with waiting Hellcats. Radar intercept controllers on USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown guided the fighters with surgical precision. "Bandits, bearing 270, Angels 15, engage!" The first clash came just after 10:36 a.m., a blinding, swirling chaos of contrails, tracers, and smoke. The Hellcats tore through the Japanese formations with disciplined ferocity. Pilots like Lieutenant Alex Vracu of USS Lexington racked up kill after kill, 6 planes downed in just 8 minutes. The radio channels crackled with voices, half adrenaline, half disbelief. "They're dropping like flies!
one pilot shouted. "Keep them off the bombers! Stay with your wingmen!" Another barked back. From the carriers below, sailors watched the battle unfold, hundreds of specks twisting and diving in the sunlit heavens. It was awe-inspiring and terrible at once. By noon, the sea was littered with burning wrecks. Parachutes dotted the sky like drifting petals. The Americans had trained, rebuilt, and refined every lesson since Midway. Now, it was all paying off. For every American lost, 10 Japanese aircraft vanished in flame. As one pilot later said, it wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. By the end of the first wave, over 200 Japanese aircraft had been destroyed, and the Americans hadn't even struck the enemy fleet yet. And still, Admiral Mitcher's command cowered in the morning light, ready for more. The Empire had sent its best, and now it was about to lose everything that gave it wings.
By early afternoon, June 19, 1944, the Philippine Sea had become a graveyard for the once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy. Smoke trails stretched across the sky like torn brush strokes on a blue canvas. The faint crackle of radio chatter mixed with the deep thunder of anti-aircraft guns echoing from the American fleet below. On the deck of the USS Enterprise, CV-6, sailors and gunners stood at their stations, eyes squinting into the blinding glare. Radar blips flickered again, another wave incoming. Osawa wasn't giving up. The order came swiftly from the flag bridge of Admiral Mipscher's flagship. Prepare for additional intercepts, rotate squadrons, launch Group 2. Within minutes, the flight decks became organized chaos. Deck crews clad in colored shirts denoting their duties, red for ordnance, yellow for flight directors, blue for handlers, raced between roaring engines and whirling propellers. Bombs were secured, ammunition belts fed into .50 caliber Brownings, and fuel hoses hissed as fresh squadrons prepared for takeoff. As the new wave of Hellcats roared skyward, Admiral Spruance stood aboard his command ship, USS Indianapolis, CA-35, watching the horizon through his binoculars. His decision to keep the fleet tight and defensive, rather than chase the Japanese carriers, had been controversial. Many officers thought he was too cautious, but Spruance was a chess player. He knew Osawa's fleet couldn't hide forever. If the Americans held their position, Japan's air arm would be destroyed before it even reached striking range. And that's exactly what was happening. At 1:30 p.m., the second Japanese attack wave met the waiting Hellcats, nearly 300 American fighters stacked in layered patrols. They came in from the north and west, flying low over the water in tight formation. But the Hellcats dove on them like wolves. Machine guns blazed, the air filled with tracer fire, glowing orange against the blue sky. Explosions bloomed as Japanese bombers disintegrated mid-air, their payloads detonating before they could be released. One Hellcat pilot, Ensign Carl Brown of USS Yorktown, later recalled, "It was like shooting ducks in a pond. They came in straight and level, no evasive maneuvers, just straight into our guns." And that's when the phrase was born, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By 2 p.m., the Japanese formations had completely disintegrated. The few surviving aircraft broke off and fled westward, some so damaged they ditched into the sea before reaching home base. Meanwhile, the Americans regrouped and rearmed. Below deck, crews worked like machines. The Essex-class carriers' advanced elevators and hangar systems allowed them to rearm faster than any fleet in history. Aircraft were rolled below, refueled, reloaded, and raised again within minutes. What had once taken hours for the Japanese took mere moments for the Americans. On the Japanese flagship Taiho, Admiral Osawa stood silent, face pale under the dim bridge lights. His radio officers relayed fragments of desperate reports. Second wave destroyed, few aircraft returning, requesting direction, engines failing. Osawa clenched his fists. He had launched over 350 aircraft. Barely a fraction had survived. His once elite pilots, the veterans of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Midway, were gone,
replaced by green recruits barely trained for carrier landings. The Imperial Navy had gambled everything on this decisive strike and lost it all before even sighting an American ship. As the afternoon wore on, Spruance's radar screens cleared. The last of the Japanese blips faded into the distance. On the flight decks, the victorious Hellcats began returning, their fuel low, wings scarred, guns empty. "Signal recovery," Mitscher ordered. It was late afternoon now. The sun burned low, painting the sea in copper light as one by one the aircraft returned to their floating homes. Hundreds of men crowded the decks, guiding their comrades in with paddles and flares. The sea breeze carried the acrid scent of gunpowder and oil, mingled with the faint sweetness of hydraulic fluid. But for many, the day wasn't over. As reports flooded in, the scale of the destruction became clear. Over 300 Japanese aircraft shot down, at the cost of just 29 American planes. Mitscher walked the flight deck of the Lexington, helmet in hand, face grim but proud. He said, "We've just taken the heart out of their air arm. They'll never recover from this." But the admirals knew one thing. The enemy's carriers were still out there, somewhere beyond the horizon, and tomorrow the Americans would go hunting. The Empire had thrown its sword and found only the sea waiting to swallow it whole.
June 20th, 1944. Dawn over the Philippine Sea. A gray mist hung over the water as Task Force 58 sailed westward in cautious pursuit. The night before, Admiral Mitscher's fleet had slept under a sky still glowing with distant fires. The Japanese had vanished into the horizon, or so it seemed. Now, Spruance and Mitscher faced a brutal decision: pursue the fleeing enemy or protect the vulnerable invasion fleet still landing Marines on Saipan. Spruance hesitated, a man of reason, discipline, and patience. He had seen the cost of rashness at Midway and knew how easy it was for a powerful fleet to walk into an ambush. Yet the atmosphere on the flag bridge of USS Indianapolis was thick with anticipation. The Americans had just shattered Japan's air arm. Now they wanted the carriers themselves. By mid-morning, radar reports hinted at scattered enemy contacts to the west. Mitscher made his choice. He stepped onto the bridge of USS Lexington, his voice steady. "Gentlemen, we've spent the last day defending. It's time we hit back. Launch every strike group we can carry." Below decks, the ship exploded into motion. Ordnancemen rolled torpedoes across the hangar floors. Armorers fed belts into machine guns, and flight crews hustled to their aircraft. The deck air boss barked orders through his megaphone. "Pilots to your stations, this is the big one." At 4 p.m., over 200 aircraft thundered into the sky from across 15 Essex-class carriers, Avengers, Helldivers, and Hellcats, the largest coordinated strike group in the Pacific to that date. The Hellcats climbed through layers of cloud, engines growling as they broke into open sunlight. At 20,000 feet, the vast Pacific spread out below them, an endless, glimmering battlefield. Commander David McCampbell, leading the strike group, adjusted his oxygen mask and scanned the horizon. "Keep tight formation," he said into his radio. "We find them, we finish them." Hours passed. The fleet searched an empty ocean, the horizon unbroken. Then, at 6:30 p.m., a cry went out from the lead scout. "Enemy sighted! Multiple carriers dead ahead!" Ozawa's mobile fleet had been found, and it was in ruins. The Taiho, Ozawa's new flagship, had been struck by a single torpedo from the submarine USS Albacore earlier that day. At first, the damage seemed manageable, but leaking gasoline fumes had filled the hangar decks. By noon, a spark triggered a chain of explosions that tore the ship apart. The pride of Japan, its most advanced carrier, vanished beneath the waves, taking 1,600 men with her. Now, as Mitscher's strike force descended upon the fleeing remnants, they found Shokaku, Zuikaku, and several light carriers exposed and unprotected. The first Avengers dove from 12,000 feet, their torpedoes slicing into the water like silver knives. Moments later, the sky erupted.
Explosions rocked the Japanese formation, torpedo wakes streaking toward hulls, bombs slamming into flight decks. The veteran carrier Shokaku, one of the few survivors of Pearl Harbor, took 3 direct hits. Her deck split open in a geyser of flame. Minutes later, a violent secondary explosion tore her apart. Black smoke spiraled skyward as she sank, bow first, into the depths. From the cockpit of his Helldiver, Lieutenant James Rigg saw the blast light up the dusk. It looked like the sun had fallen into the sea, he later said. Ozawa watched helplessly from his remaining carrier, Zuikaku, as the destruction unfolded. The radio was silent now, his air groups annihilated, his flagship gone, his remaining ships crippled. He could only retreat. As darkness fell, the American pilots turned for home. But there was one problem. They had flown farther than ever before, and night was closing in fast. They were still hundreds of miles from their carriers. Mitchell knew the risk. Landing aircraft on a carrier at night, in darkness, was nearly suicidal. But to order them to ditch in the sea meant losing over 200 aircraft and dozens of pilots. He turned to his bridge officers. "Turn on the lights," he said simply. Every ship in Task Force 58, every carrier, cruiser, and destroyer switched on its running lights, illuminating the vast Pacific night. The carriers glowed like floating cities in the dark. It was a dangerous move, a beacon to any remaining enemy submarine, but it saved lives. One by one, the pilots found their way home, guided by the faint glow of the fleet. Some ran out of fuel and ditched nearby, but many landed safely, exhausted and shaken. Mitchell stood on deck, watching the returning planes, his face lit by the ghostly glow of searchlights. That night, more than 80 aircraft were lost to darkness and exhaustion, but the battle was over. The Imperial Navy's carrier force, once the terror of the Pacific, had been broken beyond repair. The next morning, the sea was eerily calm. Oil slicks spread across the water. Debris drifted for miles, a flight helmet, a torn life raft, the charred wing.